Next presentation is from Doug Wegner. It is not live. It is recorded, and that's a mute point. It is still spectacular. Doug Wegner, U.S. fishery most of the time, but he does fish the Canada size. He fishes all over the Midwest. Not explicitly a musky angler, but largely. He has a YouTube account called Doug Wegner Fishing. Again, subscribing to these guys increases their exposure. I believe they get paid for it, and it's good for their livelihood, and it's a way to show your thanks for the work they do. This presentation is about how to use your electronics on large bodies of water. He's working mostly, I believe, on Green Bay, but he does do Lake of the Woods, and it would apply to Georgian Bay and other large bodies. And any information we can to teach us how to use these fancy electronics we have is incredibly valuable. Doug's got 2,020,000 views from his YouTube videos. There's lots of entertainment, but also education in there. His guiding service is booked up full, so I can't even encourage you there. But if you can get out with him, do so. And without further ado, I'm going to let us get to the show. Get your pens and pencils ready. It's going to be great.
All right. Hey, guys. Doug Wegner here. I'm in Wisconsin. I'm coming to you guys via internet. This is actually a pre-recording. I want to thank John and Lisa for putting up with me. I think we're 45 minutes behind schedule due to my technical difficulties on my end. But we're here. We're talking muskies. It's exciting. I'm going to get all this stuff dialed in. We've got a really cool presentation here for you guys. And it's going to be based on electronics. I think electronics are a huge question mark for a lot of muskie fishermen. And personally, where I fish on Green Bay, there's a lot of massive flats and just a ton of water to try and cover. And the fastest way to do that is by using your electronics to your advantage. I'm personally a big Hummingbird guy, basically because of their side imaging. Their side imaging capabilities are absolutely incredible. They blow any other company's imagery out of the water. With live sonar now coming into play with musky fishing, that's going to change the game here as well too. I'm excited to see Hummingbird's live sonar that's coming out here very shortly. Obviously, a lot of anglers already know about Panoptics, and there's just a ton of cool stuff and a ton of new doors that are going to be opened because of electronics themselves. So we're going to get into a lot of side imaging stuff, and then this kind of correlates into, now I'm starting to use the 360 imaging as well for musky fishing. So we're going to get into, like I said, mainly talk about side imaging. That's a really good place to start. And if I had to pick one transducer to have, or one ability or feature, I should say, on my electronics to have, it would be the Hummingbird Mega Side Imaging, hands down. For musky fishing, it's the most effective tool if I had to just pick one. Okay, so we are going to get into this. Like I said, I've got a presentation here, and we're going to go through this. Obviously, if you guys don't know, I fish on Green Bay, Wisconsin. Like I said, is primarily where I spend the majority of my time. I've been a full-time fishing guide here for now 4 years. And this morning I was out fishing walleyes. I had a guide trip this morning. We caught some nice walleyes. I'm going to do this here real quick, and then I'm going back out on the water to run another guide trip this afternoon for some more walleyes. So we're about, I think, 5 weeks out from our opener. Our musky opener here is May 29th this year. So very, very excited for that. This fish you guys are actually seeing was from very early season. This is a pre-spawn 53-incher that I caught a handful of years ago, just an absolute giant fish. But yeah, and this fish actually I saw on side. I caught this fish simply because of side imaging, and that's part of why I used this fish in this photo for the beginning of this seminar. This fish, and we'll get into that, but I did drive past a point that I didn't really have any confidence in fishing prior to seeing there was 2 fish there, grabbed a bait, sharpened my hooks, and I took a picture of the fish with my phone on side imaging. And if you look at the timestamp, it's like, I think 13 minutes later, I have a picture of it like this, or this photo here. I was actually fishing by myself. A walleye guy that was fishing close to me took this photo. And yeah, it's just amazing, amazing fish. So we're going to get into this stuff real quick. A little bit about me. I guess I'm actually 26 years old now. This was from last year. Like I said, I grew up in Wisconsin. I'm a full-time fishing guide. I guide for walleyes, smallmouth, and muskies. Primarily, I guide on Green Bay. I start here in March, And I've been guiding. I go and guide on Lake of the Woods for about a month. The month of July, we run some muskie schools there. We're trying to run some muskie schools there. Obviously, with the border issues, we haven't been able to run those. And then I'm back in Green Bay for the remainder of the season. So I spend a lot of time in northwestern Ontario. I've been very fortunate to fish there. Absolutely love that water. And then I obviously spend a ton of time down here in Green Bay. So I'm on the water. The middle of March is when I start fishing my walleyes. And then, I've got my other species I go through. And then I think last year, my last day was December 9th of musky fishing. So very, very long open water season. I get to see a lot of cool stuff, and I get to look at my graphs a lot. And those are the biggest thing that put fish in my boat is my graphs. So we're going to go through a few of those features that I really like starting out now. So like I said, guys, the number one tool in my electronics is my Hummingbird Electronics. It doesn't matter if, you could compare it to the newest rod, the newest reel, the latest and greatest bait. I would trade them all for my Hummingbird Electronics. It's absolutely amazing what these units do for me. It gives me confidence to keep fishing, make one more cast, one more pass, and eventually put one more fish in the bag. So like I say, it's hands down the most amazing thing. And specifically talking to Canadian guys, or where this is mainly being based out of, a really cool option with Hummingbird is the Autochart Live feature. Now this is a feature that you can use on just about any Hummingbird Helix or Solix unit, and now they have Apexes as well. But this is just a card. It's a very small SD card. It's $100 USD. I always forget about the conversion, but $100 basically for this card. And what this allows you to do is make a map of your own lake. So there might be a lot of places where you fish in Canada where there's not any maps of this lake, and you've laid out 100, maybe 1,000 waypoints to lay out these pieces of structure. Well, now this technology makes its own map of the lake itself. So if you look at the screen right here, you can see I'm doing all these passes. I'm actually trolling muskies right here, and this is a spot on a lake in northwestern Ontario, Pipestone, actually, where my wife's resort is. And there's no map of this lake. So this is some really, really cool structures. You can see very steep stuff, very deep open water. If you look down in the corner, this is like 120 feet. It's just big trout water with these big reefs. This was later in the fall. You can see the temperature is 48 degrees. And yeah, we're trolling big crankbaits over this deep structure, this spawning structure for ciscos and whitefish and tulipies, whatever you want to call them. But yeah, just really, really cool feature. So this allows me to make a map of any specific lake. It doesn't matter if there's already a chip of it, if it's a Hummingbird Lake Master chip or a Navionics chip or any kind of chip. There's 2 slots in these units. So you put your standard mapping chip in one slot, and you put your Autochart Live chip in the other. And it's 3 clicks of a button. It's the most simple thing to turn on. You go to menu, Autochart on. It's very, very simple. And I have a YouTube channel that I display a lot of this stuff. It's called Doug Wegner Fishing. I post a ton of musky videos on there, and then also showing how to use these electronics to your advantage. I actually have a video from the day before this where we're auto charting a lake, and I actually go through and talk about the auto charting process with the Helix units. This is actually the unit in my wife's boat, in her tiller. And I was just using my card that I took out of my graph from Green Bay, went to Canada, plugged it into her Helix 10, and started making my own map. And the one thing to understand about the auto chart is it's not deleting anything if you have 2 chips next to each other, because you can lay this information over top of a chip that's already there, and you're not deleting anything. As soon as you pull this chip out, all this information is gone. So you'll see, I think in my next slide or next 2 slides, I've got a picture of a Green Bay map where I'm seeing my Lake Master chip, and then my auto chart is over top of it. And you'll realize that, if you start running this stuff, how far off a lot of these contours are, and it'll show you a lot of little spots, even on places that are mapped, that you never knew about. I mean, I've been fishing up here for quite a while. I mean, not as long as some of these other guys, but enough to know, 90% of what's there. And it's amazing how much stuff this auto chart actually picks up when you're not paying attention. So Autochart Live is a super cool feature. I think it's a huge benefit to a lot of anglers. I know I'm always running it regardless if it's on Green Bay or Minnesota or when I'm up in Canada. So very cool feature. And it's really, really cheap. It's $100, and it's already built into your unit. As long as you have a Helix unit or Solux or an Apex, you are good to go. So very, very cool feature. Highly recommended, especially to a lot of Canadian guys. If you don't have very detailed maps, you now can go around, troll your areas, or even drive through it. If you're casting it, you're generally not going to take the same line twice, and you're going to get a pretty fast layout of your structure that you're fishing and give you a better idea. You can see those little inside turns, those little points, or where you're seeing these fish, you know, where you're getting your follows from might start to make sense. And then you can replicate that from spot to spot, you know, across your lake, and see if those fish are sitting on specific pieces of structure. So very cool feature, very inexpensive. Absolutely love it. And it's just cool to map out the lake. And this is your own information. You don't have to share this with anybody. That's arguably the best part. So that chip I hold very close to my heart. You can make duplicates of it. I've got backups of mine. I know, and it's just really, really cool stuff, especially, you know, where a lot of you guys are fishing up in Canada. So if you want to see more information exactly on how to use it, like I say, check out my YouTube channel. It's all the information's there. I think the one video I made, I was like Autochart Muskies or something like that, but it's just me by myself out in a boat and trolling around a big 13-inch grandma and auto charting out a different lake, actually on clear water, and getting ripped by a fish. So really, really cool. There's a big reef that I didn't really know was there, and it was just kind of following the contours, seeing where it led me, and it led me to a muskie and ended up mapping out a really cool section of the lake. So auto chart live, super, super cool. Oh, here's an image of the auto chart over a Lake Master. So if you look here on the right hand side of the split screen, you'll see how far off some of these contours are. And granted, Green Bay is very flat. Okay, it's very, very massive flats. But if you look at this, okay, this 4-foot contour line in the white. Okay, so this is your 4-foot contour line. Okay, shore is obviously down here in the corner. This would be your 5-foot contour line. So where this 5-foot contour line, and this is from the actual map on my Lake Master chip, and the orange is where my auto chart has now been recording, you can see that it's actually 8 feet of water versus 5 feet of water. Now, in some places on a steep break, that might not mean much, but in a giant, massive flat like Green Bay, where a 12-inch, you know, rise or dip in contour can hold a fish, that's a lot, and that's something that I really, really pay attention to. You can see my other tracks going through here. I actually wasn't running my auto chart, as you can see, because I was going through these areas without it actually recording. But all these waypoints are just me marking fish on side imaging. I like to mark all the fish that I see to see if any of those patterns kind of replicate. And that's what we're seeing here on the left. If you guys look, we're going to get into, like I say, more of the side imaging stuff now. And this is a really nice image of a fish on a split screen sonar. Obviously, we'll get into some more stuff from this, but we're going to start really, really basic. And we're going to take what we learned here with these images and kind of build on them to show you, you know, make sense of what you're seeing with your electronics. So this here is an image of a fish. Obviously, we're trolling at this point. This was in the fall. This fish is just on a large sand flat. You can see there's some rocks and, you know, a little bit of hard bottom area here. But here, we've got the elephant in the room, right? So what we're seeing here is a muskie on side imaging. And how I can tell it's a muskie is basically the overall size of the fish, and then really the shape of the tail is what's really giving it away. And this could be a very large pike. Big pike do mark like muskies, but if a pike's this big, I don't think I'd be too mad about catching it. But you can see just the depth, how thick this fish is. You can see the pointed nose, and the tail is really the giveaway. That nice fork in the tail is what you want to see. And you can actually tell the difference between a muskie and a sturgeon. And I've seen it a ton. And their head will be shaped a little bit different, but then their tail, if you look at a sturgeon, the top part on their tail is actually like 3 to 4 inches longer. And you should be able to see that on this shadow that you're getting from your mega imaging. So being able to tell the difference between a muskie and a sturgeon is pretty incredible. And that just goes to show the power of these electronics, right? So let's get into this a little more, like I say. So what you're actually seeing here, this highlighted yellow piece right here, okay, that really bright piece, now that's the fish itself. So what's happening is your sonar is shooting out its frequency, and it's hitting this really hard object, okay? And it's illuminating the fish, okay? So the fish itself is this bright yellow piece, right? Now this shadow or dark space is where that sonar can't hit because this is in the way. It's basically a flashlight. if you can think of it like that. So it's showing me basically the fish itself and then the shape of the fish, right? So we can tell a couple different things from this image. Now we can say, if I have my settings set to, maybe this would have been 80, we'll call it 100 feet, okay? So from the center line here, okay, that's the center of my boat, that's where my transom is, that's where my transducer is, out to the side of the screen is 100 feet, right? So generally this dark area below you, this is gonna be the depth of water you're in. I think, say the boat's in 10 feet of water. We'll make it easy round numbers. So from here to here is 10 feet, right? So if you double that, you're probably about here in 20, and right about here, you're about 30 feet. So this fish is about 30 feet off the side of the boat, right? So now you know how far away the fish is from the boat, okay? And you can drop your drag your cursor over, put it right in this fish, hit mark, and it will put a waypoint 30 feet over the side of your boat exactly where this fish is, okay? It's not gonna put the waypoint where your boat is. If you drag your cursor over, it will put the waypoint right on the fish. So next time you come through, maybe you want to put a down rod over that fish, maybe you want to put a planer board over that fish, but you know where that fish last was, right? So very, very crucial information. Now, what else we can tell from this image is how far the fish is off the bottom. Now, what's happening here is that, and how you tell that is the distance between the highlighted piece and the shadow itself is going to tell you that information. The closer they are together, the closer the fish is to the bottom. The further apart they are, the further the fish is off the bottom, okay? So here, this fish, the two shadows, or the shadow and the highlighted piece aren't touching, but they are very, very close to each other. I would say this fish is within 12 to 14 inches of the bottom, right? So now you know, okay, I'm in 10 feet of water, this fish is 9 feet down. You never want to be below the fish with your baits. You always want to be above them, but you don't want to be too far above them. So in this case, maybe try and run your baits between 7 and 8 feet down to target this specific fish. Now, if you're seeing other fish that are higher in the column, I would probably focus on those fish. They're probably more active. But a fish like this, if all your fish you're seeing are on the bottom like this, and they're generally in that 10 foot of water, try and run your baits 8 feet down. And you can replicate this if it's 20 feet of water, or wherever, to whatever scenario you're fishing. But this is a super basic, simple image. Nothing too crazy going on here, but we really need to lay down the base for what you guys are seeing in this specific image, okay? Next image. All right, this is a casting scenario. If you guys can see, we're in 7 feet of water. The boat is moving 0.6 miles an hour, so we're drifting or casting. Our water temperature is 70.5, okay? Now, if you look at this image here, you'll see we've got our center line, right? So this is the boat. This is our 7 feet of water, right? From the white line all the way to the bottom right there. That's our first 7 feet. And then we've got the remaining, whatever this is. This isn't even a full picture of my screen, but regardless, you can see all this on the left here, all this kind of streaky line. That's all a weed bed, right? Now on the flip side, we've got our weed bed over here, and here is our weed edge. If you can see my mouse going up this edge, right? So this is our weed line, and all of a sudden, boom, there's our fish, okay? So now this fish is relating to the weed line, but it's actually sitting out on the sand. Technically, it's on the sand edge. And what's really impressive about this image is that transducer was able to shoot through this weed bed and still mark this fish when it's basically belly on the bottom. You can see the highlighted piece and the shadow are basically touching, right? So it's shooting through weed growth that is maybe a foot to 18 inches tall and still showing you this high quality of an image, or this specific detail of an image. And it's really, really cool to see how this fish is positioned and where it's at. So now you've got you can drag your waypoint over, or your cursor over, put a waypoint on this fish, maybe come back to it on moon, maybe come back to a weather change, a wind change, or sunrise, sunset, whatever, whatever piece or, change you want to try and trigger this fish. But now you know where that fish is. You don't need to follow, you don't need to bite, you know where that fish is. And that is so, so crucial with muskies, because we get so little interaction from these fish. So to know where that thing is very, very, very important. All right. So next image. Here we have just a couple fish, a couple different images here off to the side. Again, you're just kind of seeing the size of them or the shape of them. Here, these ones are hard to see the highlighted pieces of exactly where this fish is related to the bottom. If you look here, I want to say this fish is right here. Okay, on the right hand side of your screen. I want to say it's right there. So this fish is actually a decent amount or distance off the bottom. I'm sure I'm in like, say, 10 feet of water. Again, a lot of our fishing is less than 12 feet of water here. So I'd say this fish is maybe 2 feet off the bottom or so, but just a nice image here. Now on the left, you can see we've got another fish. This one is really hard to see. I think it's right there, okay, where that actual fish is. So this one's a little bit closer to the bottom, but you can also see over here on the right, you've got some bait fish. Maybe it's a perch or a small walleye or something like that, but you can actually see this small highlighted piece right there. And then there's the shadow, and then again right there, and then there's another shadow. So very cool. It just kind of gives you reference of, you know, maybe this fish is in the 4-foot region, and this fish is, you know, in the 16, 18, 20-inch region. And I use this technology for not only musky fishing. Musky fishing just shows up, muskies show up just really nice because they're so large, right? I use this for bass fishing, use this for walleye fishing. I know people that use it for crappie fishing. You can see some really, really small objects, and they just show up as little specks and dots, and you can get a really good idea of what you're seeing. But muskies show up really nice just due to the size of them. All right, next we're gonna look at this. This is a couple images here in a trolling scenario. So if you guys look at the screen, you'll see that, let's start on the right-hand side. Okay, let's start on the right, this image over here, okay? Now we've got our full screen here. We're going down, we're getting deeper, okay, if you can tell that. So from this white line over to the yellow here is a little bit smaller distance than at the top of our screen here to here. So we're coming off of a break line, right? So it's here and then we're getting deeper. So that distance, the black area is getting larger. Now what you're seeing is you see this blip right here under the boat, okay? Big highlighted piece. And what this is this is a muskie, okay? We literally just drove right over top of one. This fish is within, say, 6-8 feet of the transducer, right? We just drove right over the top of this fish. Now, you can see the mark here itself, and you can see the shadow, and you can tell the distance here is quite larger. So this fish is, well, we're in 9.5 feet of water right now. So this might have been, say, 8 feet of water back here. So this fish is probably 4 feet down the column. This is a really, really active fish from what I'm seeing. When you see those fish up high, they're generally feeding, and that's when I get excited. But yes, this fish we drove right over. Now in this case, our fish generally like planer boards here more so than down rods, and the reason being we control 3 lines per person here, and I know Canada only allows 1. It frustrates me when I'm there, and a lot of your guys' fish are structure trolling or contour trolling, but we've got these giant flats that we get to cover, even like on St. Clair. I believe they let the Canadians run 2 lines there. But, we didn't have a down rod in this position or in this instance just due to, I generally get more bites on boards. It depends on the day. The rougher the day, generally we get more bites on down rods, but, overall I catch way more fish on boards. So here maybe I just had 1 person in the boat where we could only have 6 rods, or maybe I had 3 people in the boat and we could have 12 rods and they're all 12 planer boards. So that fish, like I say, is just right under the boat. Now, what I want you to look at on the left-hand side is the same exact thing, right? So we've got our fish right here, okay, and we've got the shadow back here. Now it's raining, right? It looks there's some water on the screen. You can kind of see the bottom is a little bit wavy. So I'm pretty sure that this is a rougher day. And that's probably why I have a down rod in. And how you can, now the cool thing about this is you can tell this fish is right on my down rod, because this highlighted line that comes through the screen here is actually the bubble track from my down rod, right? So my down rod is positioned in front of my transducer, somewhere along my, what would you want to call it, railing or whatever, the side of my boat. And this bubble track is actually getting picked up by my transducer, and that's how I know this fish is right on it. So as soon as I see that, I'm waiting just for that reel to light off. I know this one didn't bite, because that would have made it a lot cooler. I would have remembered that. But seeing fish like this, it has happened to me where you see them right there, right on the down rod, and then all of a sudden that rod goes, and it's just super, super cool. So this, if you guys see this, just understand that this is a muskie. This is a fish. Or large fish, I should say. It might be a pike, but a large fish right underneath your boat, okay? Now, this is a short video clip. I kind of want to show you guys what this looks like as the screen is scrolling. instead of just a simple picture. So before I get this thing rolling, I want you guys to look on the right-hand side here. You'll see this transition, right? So this could be anywhere that you guys could see this, possibly in Canada. This specifically is just a break wall, a man-made break wall in Green Bay. And this is all man-made rock. These are pretty large, I'd say 18 to 36 inch rock right here. And I'm trolling in a river. This is late in the late fall. You can see the water is only 35 degrees. I'm going very slow, 2.5 miles an hour. But yes, just creeping along here, and you'll see right here, this is going to be our fish. Okay, it's not a very big one, I wouldn't say, but it is a musky on-site imaging, and it is relating to this rock transition and hanging out in the sand. So I'm going to play this video. I want you guys to just see how it's playing, kind of what it looks like, and then I do believe I zoom in on this as well. Here you can see it's moving. Get the phone a little closer. This was a Solix unit, so it's touchscreen. You can actually zoom in 2 times or 4 times. And now you can kind of see the fork here in the tail. And then this is the fish's head up here, right? Now this highlighted piece, I would say, is right here in my best guess. And you can play with your settings. I know this wasn't actually my boat this day. I was using someone else's boat, but generally I'll play with my settings as soon as I get on the water, and every water clarity or watercolor shows up a little different. It's just a matter of how your transducer is shooting through the water. If you get really, really dirty water, you'll have to play with your stuff. You don't get quite as clean of an image, but if you've got clean water where you don't have algae, or this was like in the fall of the year, I think we just had some rain, so the water's a little dirty. There's a lot of leaves from the trees that were floating downriver and getting caught on our baits. But yes, this here is a cool little image, and just wanted to show you guys what it looked like when it's rolling. All right, so if we haven't lost you guys yet, we're going to kind of look at seeing multiple fish at once, and this can kind of throw your eye off and make you wonder what's going on, or is this too good to be true? But it'll actually blow your mind how many times, at least from what I've seen, is how many times you'll have multiple fish using a spot. And people think of muskies as being so territorial, and I do think they are at times, but even in Green Bay, we have a lot of fish that are stacked together, and people say it's mainly because of the fish being stocked and they've grown up together and they want to hang out together. Our fishery here is 100% stocked. We have very little natural reproduction. But even in places like Canada, where they're in Lake of the Woods, I've seen multiple fish in a spot. I've had times where there'll be 3-4 fish on the screen at once, and that's a natural fishery. So I do think they're territorial at times, but not as much as people think. So seeing multiple fish in the screen is something that's really cool. And you guys can see here we've got 2 fish. We've obviously got this one here that looks like about a 60-incher. And then we've also got this fish up here. Now these fish are both relating to a weed line. You can see the edge of it right here. Okay, and it jumps over to the right side of the screen. Okay, so both these fish are sitting out in the sand. Now we've got our highlighted piece right there from that fish. And our other one is somewhere down in here. Now these images are actually from a Gen 2 Helix unit. So these are actually not nearly as crisp as what the images are nowadays. But yes, this is even old technology, and they're showing up this well. All these images are from a Gen 2 Helix unit, and now they have a Gen 4 Helix unit. And the Mega Plus, they said was 20% clear and 20% further distance. They weren't lying. That new stuff is pretty amazing. But yeah, seeing multiple fish on the screen, this is what they look like. Do not be surprised if you see this. It happens quite regularly. Now, this is a specific night on Green Bay where I was trolling around, and at this specific time I'm trolling as well, but I'm trolling around and I'm marking all of these fish. Now, if you look on the screen, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this one right here is potentially a 7. Okay, now all these fish aren't always going to be perfectly parallel to your transducer, and you're going to hit the side of them and get a nice clean image and a big shadow. Like a fish on the right here, this fish could be looking right at the boat, and when your transducer hits that fish, all it's going to hit is the fish's face. So instead of getting this big 40 to 50 inch shadow or return from your sonar, you might only get 6, 8, 10 inches, you know, whatever the width of that fish's head is, and it'll show up as a longer shadow here in the back. So don't knock this just because it doesn't look like any of these other ones. This can definitely be a fish that's just watching me go by as my kicker's going by. This fish could have just spun, or that was the way it was positioned, but it's looking right at my boat. So I'm pretty confident that this here is a muskie. Now, I kept trolling over these fish again and again, and what ended up happening, like, I couldn't get them to go, was changing baits, everything else, this, that, and the other. Well, finally, right at sunset, we get a bite, right? Rod goes off. We catch a mid or upper 40 incher. Okay, this is a good friend of mine, Nick Eddy. He owns Musky Frenzy Bucktails, a really good dude, and he came out to fish with me for Green Bay for the first time, and boom, we catch our fish right at sunset, right? So I knew those fish were there. I just kept going over them and over and over them, and there was a ton of fish. That was just one screenshot. There was about 40, I would say 40 to 50 fish in this small 200 to 300 yard circle. Okay, they were everywhere. It was absolutely insane. I've never seen fish stacked up like that. But finally, a rod goes off. Now we continue to troll after dark, and these fish just are not biting, and I can still see them. I know they're there. So finally, as I screw it, let's pick up the trolling rods, grab the casting rods, and just go through this stretch. We can make a drift. There's a pot of fish here. They're everywhere. Let's just see what happens. Maybe they want blades instead of crankbaits. And first pass, I catch a 51 incher in the figure 8. Okay, and this was in that same pot of fish. It was just one of those things. This fish ate a double 10 Musky Frenzy stagger blade, and just a really, really, really cool fish. You can see the trolling rods all down here in the corner. They're all stacked up, put away somewhat. I was probably in a rush. I didn't put them in my rod locker, but I just wanted to get casting at these fish. And right after dark, this was 20 minutes into casting, bang, 51 incher in the boat. So really, really, really cool just to see all those fish keep going on them. If I never would have been able to see those fish on side imaging, I never would have been doing the circles in the first place to catch Nick's fish right at sunset. And I definitely wouldn't have been able to know that those fish were there and continue to cast at them after dark and then catch this one. So that was really, really awesome. Now, next drift, we end up getting a 4-footer. I got this one out on the cast, and that was pretty awesome. I know I flipped it on this screen. I'm just not seeing it on this screen. Hopefully it didn't freeze on you guys. But if you can see it, just another 4-footer. The next drift, we had a little bit of a window there. Obviously, we caught the fish at sunset. Then we caught the 51 incher, and then I got a 48 incher. So those 3 fish right there, you know, that's enough of a testimonial for me and why I need my electronics and why I need really good side imaging. Because like I say, I would have left. I never would have been doing those circles. I would have left. Those fish never would have known I was there. Never would have caught any of them without seeing those fish on my side imaging. So very, very cool stuff. Now, the next morning, I had Nick again, and we were going to get up and fish. So we fished until midnight here. We didn't get any more bites. I think the last fish we caught was at like 10. It was this fish here. I had one other really good follow on side imaging, and we'll get to that. But the next morning, it's like, okay, well, where do we go? What do we do? And I was like, do we cast? Do we troll? Right? So we caught them casting, obviously better than we caught them trolling. But these fish were on a massive flat, and they could have moved anywhere overnight. So I really I decided as much as I wanted to cast, that we're going to start trolling, find them first, see if they're still potted up. And then from there, if they're not biting, we can go at them in a casting scenario. But I wanted to make sure I was on the fish right away and casting at them. So put in the boards and put down the rods, get on the kicker and just start driving around to mark them. Well, I set up the boards and we start getting right to our money spot from the night before, and Nick catches a massive 53 incher right on the same spot. The fish had not moved overnight. They stayed right there. So this was first pass of the morning. You can see the sun's just coming up. We slept for maybe a couple hours, I think 2 hours maybe. I know Nick was late to the landing. He had to get his coffee. I'm not a coffee guy. I think coffee's a waste of time. It takes up too much time in the morning, and people are crabby without it. They're too reliant on a fluid. But anyways, that's a different rant for a different day. But beautiful 53 incher, and specifically because of side imaging, I never would have went back to that spot. that next morning without it, and knowing that those fish were there, and boom, there you go. 10 minutes into trolling, I knew where they were the night before. I got all the boards in. I sat down for 5 minutes and the rod goes off, and Nick reels in his biggest muskie. So absolute freak of a fish. Really, really big one. This was just another image from that same night, the night prior, I should say. Just again, a ton of fish. You can see they're relating to the weeds, the sand. They were just everywhere. I don't know what it was, but all of a sudden there was just big push of fish. This fresh batch of fish came in and they were everywhere. It was really, really, really cool. Like I said, I've never seen this many fish in one area before. It was really awesome. Really, really awesome. Definitely a night I'll never forget. Okay, so let's talk about casting in a casting scenario. So now this image is actually from that same night. Now remember I told you, I said I had a mark or a really good follow on side imaging. And what I'm talking about is casting after dark and using your side imaging to be able to see what's behind your bait. So in prior musky fishing, people fishing after dark, you make your cast, you bring in your bait, you make a big wide figure 8, you do your 2 turns and you pull your bait out and hope there wasn't one behind it, right? Well, that's now a thing of the past from what I've learned with side imaging. And I personally fish out of the back of the boat. Guiding it puts my customers in the best position possible, but then it also allows me, if I'm fishing by myself or if I have a customer fishing in the back of the boat, I'm able to watch their lure come in and I can actually see what's going on or see if they have a fish behind their bait and tell them to keep going. So what's happening here is, let's start on the left-hand side, okay? So this over here, okay, when I'm coming in, and now here I'm still throwing that same Musky Frenzy bucktail. If you look at this small little blip right there, right? That highlighted piece and that highlighted piece. That is my bucktail going past the transducer when I do my figure 8, right? So I'm standing right over my transducer. I pull my rod past my transducer, bloop, there pops up my bucktail, right? I pull it past, come back through, bloop, there pops my bucktail, right? Now, if I can see my bait that's only 10 inches long, I should be able to see a fish behind my bait that's 50 inches long, right? So that's what this mark is. Oops, wrong mark. That's what this mark is right here, right? So this highlighted piece, again, just like our down rod fish or our fish that we're driving right over, now I've got a 10-foot rod off the side of my boat that I've got, you know, at an angle down the water. So I'm probably 6-7 feet off the side of the boat or off the transducer. And you can see this fish right here. And then you can see my bait right there in front of them. So this fish is actively chasing this bait around. You can see the distance here. We're in 9 feet of water. But you can see the distance of how far this fish is off bottom, right? So that fish, the separation there is pretty significant. That fish is up chasing the bait around. And what happened here is we're reading the screen backwards, right? So this down here at the bottom is the oldest data. So this fish came in, I don't know how many figure 8s it did prior to this, but there's, say, figure 8 number 1, figure 8 number 2, figure 8 number 3, figure 8 number 4, okay? And after 4 figure 8s, this fish disappeared because there's figure 8 number 5, there's figure 8 number 6, and figure 8 number 7 was probably somewhere up there. But I could see this fish in the pitch black on my side imaging, on my electronics, and I have a graph that's mounted right at my feet. So I'm not even looking at my rod tip. I'm looking down at my graph as I'm doing my figure 8 and just watching, right? So that's what I'm looking at, or what I'm seeing after dark. And this was really, really cool to learn about and see. And now there's no such thing as blind figure 8s after dark anymore. I mean, in this scenario, you would have done one figure 8, pulled the bait out, and there would have been a fish just sitting there waiting for you to do another one. So very, very, very crucial stuff, or very, very cool stuff. Now, we're gonna look at another image here. This is another fish that came in on a figure 8. That last one I showed you was, like I said, that midnight period. This is a few days later, or maybe a week or so later, I don't remember. But this fish here, this was at like 3 in the morning, or 3:30 in the morning. I think we started at 3 in the morning. You can see this fish right here, okay? So you can actually see my bait just barely right above my cursor there. So there's a little blip from the bait. There's your highlighted piece, and there's your shadow, right? So there's one figure 8, right? There's one time around. Here's 2 times around. Here's 3 times around, okay? Now, if you see where these shadows are showing up, they're pretty close, you know, in distance, right? From the fish here. These are all kind of matching distances. Now, all of a sudden, if you look over here, all of a sudden this shadow is, you know, the highlighted piece is probably somewhere right in here in this yellow. That's kind of why it's hard to see. But this shadow is way out here, okay? Well, if you guys remember what we were talking about before, the distance between your highlighted piece and your shadow tells you how far your fish is off the bottom, okay? So what's happening here is this fish is hanging out kind of low and slow below the bait for 2 turns, then a 3rd turn. And now here on this turn, now this fish just came up in the water column, right? So this fish was following the bait down low, and all of a sudden on this 4th turn, up this fish comes, right? Well, if you look at this mark and all this weird, you know, little tiny specks, well, what that is air bubbles, because this fish just ate the bait, right? That fish came up in the column, ate the bucktail on the turn, and now it's fighting. And these are all the air bubbles, the return you're getting from all the air bubbles, that fish fighting underwater, right? And this fish is just going back and forth. I've got this fish pinned simply because of side imaging. 3:30 in the morning, pitch black, would have made 1 figure 8, pulled the bait out, and made another cast. But instead, we've got an absolute beast. And if I've just got a quick little video here releasing it. This is a 51 incher. And you can see here, I show my screen. It was so cool. I didn't think that fish was that big. I hooked it and I seen the screen. And I just reached down and I paused the screen because I was like, this is perfect seminar material. But that's a 51 incher there. That was on, again, another Musky Frenzy bucktail. That was the double 10 stagger. But just an amazing fish, one that never would have been in the boat without side imaging or mega imaging. And here's a picture of it. This absolute awesome, awesome fish. Pitch black, 3:30 in the morning. Only boat out there, which for Green Bay is very rare, but only boat out there. Here's another fish. So this fish actually comes with a story. I don't have a picture of the screen here, but this fish here, I marked with some customers. I was fishing the back of the boat. I had a husband and wife in the front. I was throwing a bulldog, I think this was, and my customers, it was a rubber bite. I was throwing a bulldog. My customers were throwing a Medusa and a Poseidon. And we go past this fish, and I mark it on side imaging, and I stop the boat, turn the trolling motor off, and tell my customers, I was like, hey, turn around. I said, back here on this angle, 50 feet out, cast right there. There's a fish sitting there. They both turn around, they both cast, both their baits, and they get about halfway on their retrieve, and we were kind of drifting, further and further away from the fish, and without, really blasting on the trolling motor, we weren't going to be able to get another cast at it. Or my customers weren't going to be able to get another cast at it by the time they got in. So I've, of course, fling one back there, and I made 3 sweeps to the side, and then I made 1 up snap, and I was giving it a really long pause after that up rip, and just this fish eats it, and that was a cast back fish. So pretty cool. It was a 4-footer. It's 48 or 48 and a half, whatever. But just a really nice fish that, again, never would have came in the boat from that side imaging or mega side imaging. So really, really cool stuff. I've got so many stories like that of fish we've caught simply because of those electronics, and they're just bonus fish. Without those graphs, you'd never put these fish in the boat. This is a quick clip of using the side imaging. Right at dark here. I've got my 2 customers in the front of the boat, and this is a kind of a unique scenario with this fish. Now, this fish I didn't technically see come in on my bait. All of a sudden, we're drifting sideways, and I've kind of, to stay on the brake line, I've kind of got the boat going back at the same time as we're drifting. So we're kind of going down this brake line sideways, or at an angle, I should say, kind of slipping the wind. And we're coming in, and I'm coming in, and my customers had both just made a cast. They're both full cast out. And all of a sudden I see this fish as I'm backing up. I mark this fish 10 feet in front of me, right? And my bait's 20 feet from the boat. Now I'm kind of stuck at, what do I want to do? Do I want to reel the bait in real quick and make a short pitch at this fish? Or what do I do? And my initial reaction was to just shut the trolling motor off, let us drift straight at the fish, put all of our baits as close to the fish as possible, and just come in. And I'm just gonna tell my guys, hey, when you come in, just keep figure eighting. Don't make another cast. Just figure eight. We're gonna drift right over top of this fish. I can see it. I can see it here on side imaging. And it ended up. I'll play this video here. But it ended up. I saw this fish, and it worked out. We'll put it that way. So here's here's my guy in the front. There's Kyle. He made his cast. And now Ken's talking. Ken likes to tell stories. There, Ken makes his cast. Ken can tell stories now. He got a 53 3/4 with me last year. But this, I think, was 3 years ago. So I'm coming in. You can see me kind of looking down. If you can see my shadow there in the back of the boat, I'm looking at my graph. And all I do is I come in and I see this fish, and I just keep making figure eights. Right here, I'm just figure eighting. And I'm waiting for this boat to drift over top the fish. And boom, there's the hook set right there. I flip on my headlamp. Ken's going to run back, grab the net. You can see the fish fighting there. And the fish is going to go in the bag. So again, this is just another fish that, you know, without side imaging, never, ever, ever would happen. And just being able to know that fish is there, shut the trolling motor off. You know, it just happened that I was further in than my guys, so my bait kind of got to that fish first, unfortunately. But you know, I told him, I said, hey, when you come in, just keep figure eighting. Don't stop until I tell you to, because I knew this boat was just going to drift right over top of the fish. So really, really cool. High fives all the way around. Good times with these guys. But yeah, this fish was on a Musky Frenzy 8-9 stagger, and the figure eight is like a 46, 47 incher. We didn't measure it, but nice fish. Nice fish. So this is kind of, that's a whole other section to some other stuff. But basically, that is my pitch for why every musky angler needs to have the mega side imaging from Hummingbird. It's the clearest sonar that's out there as far as side imaging technology. It will put more fish in your boat if you use it to your advantage. There's just so much to learn from those units. It may be, you know, a follow after dark, or seeing a fish that you come back to later in the day, a fish that you troll over, a fish you need to turn around to troll over again. There's just a lot of really, really, really huge advantages to using your Hummingbird side imaging. And like I said, the mega stuff is by far the most clear stuff on the market. If you guys are looking to get in to a new unit, would highly, highly suggest them. The Autochart Live feature is also amazing. Don't forget about that. It's an extra $100 for that chip, and you can make your own maps of the lake. You don't need to be laying down 100 waypoints anymore. So really cool stuff. I appreciate you guys having me on. This seminar itself, I did 2 years ago, is also recorded on my YouTube channel. If you guys want to go check that out, I kind of go through everything again. If you want to, you know, go out, play with your new unit, and then come back and relay your notes, Doug Wegner Fishing is the name of my channel. Search it. There's all kinds of musky content there as well, like I say, as this exact seminar that I did at the Milwaukee show a couple of years ago. But yeah, thank you guys for having me. You guys are doing some awesome stuff for muskies. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. I know John did want me to touch real quick on one thing. I know there's some goby issues you guys are dealing with, and we deal with a ton of gobies here. But gobies are a real thing. They destroy fish hatches. We've got guys here that come and fish, you know, smallmouth and walleyes love eating gobies. And gobies are a huge invasive species. It's made our fishery actually pretty amazing. It's created an amazing food source, but it does hurt natural reproduction, especially with fish that don't nest like muskies and walleyes. Those gobies will go in and actually eat their own eggs, or eat eggs from other fish, and it's really, really hurting our stuff. And I know our smallmouth fishery is actually hurting from it, because we get a lot of guys that come up and bed fish, which drives me nuts. But what they're doing is they're pulling those big fish off the beds, and then as soon as you pull them off, there's 10 gobies sitting around those beds that are just waiting to ambush in, beat up the nest, eat a bunch of eggs. Then when that fish comes back, obviously they scatter, but then you get another bass guy that comes through and catches that bass again, and then, you know, time after time, there's just less and less eggs. So anyways, that's my quick pitch on gobies. They're an amazing food source for other fish, but as far as for what they can do to a fishery, it's very, very devastating. I hope you guys can, you know, hope some of this money helps with some stuff to hopefully cure that, or anything else you guys need for your musky fishery. But yes, thank you guys again for having me. Check me out on social media. Like I said, my YouTube channel, Facebook page, Instagram page, Doug Wegner Fishing. I'm obviously a full-time guide over here in Green Bay. I do get to Canada every now and again. If you guys ever want to book a trip or get a hold of me, social media is the best way to do it. So thank you guys very much again, and I hope you guys have a great musky season.
That was Doug Wegner, and one of the goals I had was to help increase catch rates by education. And if you're not feeling inspired and jaw dropped right now, then yeah, I don't know what kind of fishing you do. Maybe you're way better than me. That was an incredible presentation with so much information, and my mind is blown. I'll be watching that probably 4 or 5 times over on the YouTube. You got to go over and subscribe to his account. He deserves it, and that was an awesome presentation. We're very, very fortunate. Thanks to John Anderson for making that happen for us. Again, something a little bit different for us and incredibly useful. I'm going to jump right into draws here. We're going to try and get as many done before we get to our next speaker.